every once in a while, I'll write about like some random thing that happens in some small town, and someone will reply back and be like, "Well, I was there," or about how there was an unlicensed version of Cinderella's castle being built somewhere in China, and
Wow.
like it got built like 80% of the way there, and you can still see it on the side of the road if you drive down this one road. And a couple of days later, I get an email from somebody saying, I was just driving past that. I took a picture. I had no idea what it was, and you told me. I'm like, oh wow, like that keeps it going. Because the joy of discovery and of learning just compounds when you share it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Comms Confidential. This is the podcast where we talk to the communicators who are telling the stories that you read about every day. Today, I've got a great guest with me, Dan Lewis. He is the founder of the Substack, one of the preeminent AI and communications newsletters out there today. But before we go to Dan and that conversation, I want to just remind you to hit subscribe, leave us some reviews on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's get started. And this is a question we ask all of our guests. You've had a pretty established career. You've been at Visa. You've been at Warner Brothers Discovery. You've been at the Sesame Workshop, which we'll get into. 100% we'll get into that one. And now you're a newsletter founder. You're a media founder, essentially. You founded the Comstack. You founded Now I Know, which had at its peak over 100,000 subscribers. Talk to us a little bit how you got into communications and then made the pivot over to being a media entrepreneur.
Sure. So I actually got my career started as a lawyer. I practiced law for a couple of years, but I really found a passion for myself at that intersection between technology and storytelling. How do you reach audiences at scale using the tools that we have, the ones that are really new to us and allow us to connect directly to the audiences we want to reach? After law school, had a startup with some friends where we wanted to take the software that was running Wikipedia and build a sports wiki, but not just the encyclopedia, but a blogging platform as well, because that was the opportunity that's for fans, sports fans. That's what they want to do. They want to share opinions more than facts usually. So we layered in that blogging software, and that did pretty well. And I really enjoyed finding ways to take emerging technology and build media properties, tell stories, etc. So finding a role in communications really dovetailed nicely into that. I had the opportunity to be the first social media lead at Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit behind Sesame Street. And I built their digital marketing and communication strategy from the ground up. So social media, we built a corporate website a couple times, started their first email marketing program as well. Communications really is about finding ways to connect with audiences where they are. And through the technology stack, you can do that. It's really just been a natural progression for me.
Okay. I mean, look, love the fact that it's been natural. I mean, a lot of people say they fall into it. I personally found it in college, had a professor who just he was a practitioner and he was able to really connect with me on it. The fact that it's natural makes a lot of sense if you're going to be, as you have been, the digital presence between some of our favorite Sesame Street characters. We were talking offset about, you tweeted as Big Bird, you were helping Cookie Monster with some digital presence. Why don't we dive in there and talk about a little bit about the process, how you got into Cookie Monster's voice, if you will, which is an interesting one.
When you write for fictional characters, or when you write for Cookie Monster, you literally do hear his voice in your head. I won't do an impression. Don't ask me. I'm not good at it. But his grammar, his intonation, his sentence structure. He doesn't say "I want a cookie." He says "Me want cookies." That you just after a while you just pick it up, and then it kind of builds on itself. You start understanding his sense of humor. You understand where there's an opportunity to make a great joke, and there's an opportunity to share that life lesson for the young kids who you're actually building content for. I had the really fantastic opportunity to help Cookie Monster with his Reddit AMA a few years ago, and I made a bunch of suggestions that he ended up accepting and running with in the AMA. To this day is probably one of the best things I've had a hand in making. I think most of us have followed celebrities, or if in our roles as communicators have worked with executives or other leaders enough where you really do get to understand how they think and how they speak. And part of being a communications professional is being able to take that and operationalize it. And surprisingly enough, it's not all that different when you're dealing with Cookie Monster or Big Bird or Elmo. Executives are talent, Sesame Street Muppets are
Hmm.
talent. It's really one and the same.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are some of the most well-known characters over, has it been 60 years, I think? And I say that as someone who, when I graduated from college, our commencement speaker was Carol Spinney. And for those who don't know, he was Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. He actually pulled Oscar the Grouch out from underneath the podium, which was fantastic. But yeah, it's impressive. I mean, that's got to be a career. Like, okay, put that frame up on the wall a little bit.
Yeah, and my kids were the right age at the time, so
Oh,
it was really fantastic. I got to take them to the set, got them a tour. They met
oh,
some
that's
of the
amazing.
characters. It was wonderful. And it's really hard to, from there, really go anywhere else because Sesame Street is just a magical place. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed working at Warner Brothers Discovery and at Visa, but you don't have Cookie Monster. What can you do?
No, no. I'm gonna ask, and I'm sure you have an answer for this. Were there cookie crumbs all over the keyboard for the Reddit AMA?
No, but we had, you have to keep him away from the computer because he'll eat everything. So it was a clean space, but I did shoot a video with him, and at the end of it, I did pick a cookie crumb off the ground and I put it in a mason jar, and I have one on my shelf over there.
That's
So
amazing. That's
that's one of my
fantastic.
favorite collectibles.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one you take away from work, and you're just like, no matter what, there's
Yeah,
it's going to be a story piece. So let's talk about you as a media entrepreneur. You obviously have had Now I Know, which, as I mentioned, you had over 100,000 or so subscribers at its peak. You've recently launched the Comstack, which is more focused on the evolution of AI within the communications industry. So we'll dive deep into that. But I'm curious, you said communications came naturally. Newsletter writing and driving an audience and becoming effectively like a business owner does not always come naturally. What drove that decision to be like, hey, I'm going to go into media entrepreneurship? And then what'd you learn from Now I Know years ago that you're applying to this new platform?
sure. So really, for me, it was all about tool mastery of all things, and that's gonna sound strange, but that's the truth. I had before I joined Sesame, I was between jobs, looking at a different bunch of different opportunities, hooked on with a couple different startups, all of which were trying to do what I had been doing with that wiki platform, trying to build an audience using whatever technology was out there. And one of the companies that I was helping was an email newsletter, a sports email newsletter, trying to do what Thrillist had done, but for like daily sports. Part of my
That's a
role was to,
throwback.
yeah, it's a long time ago.
Thrillist is a throwback.
I'm dating myself here, right? It's bad. And part of my role there was to build the email audience. And I had done it for websites before, and social media had just started emerging. I had started to do it for like Twitter accounts, etc. And I figured, building an email list has to be the same thing. It's like, get that big link, people sign up, and you're good to go. And we did that, and it didn't work. People weren't signing up, and it bothered me. I've always been able to build online audiences. Why can't I do it through email? And I need to figure out what's the trick here. How do I master that? So a couple months into my tenure at Sesame, actually, so this is a little more than 15 years ago now, I had this idea for a daily trivia email newsletter where every morning I share a fun fact and a story behind it. And sent it to like 20 friends. I'm like, this is pretty interesting. They liked it. Over the next few weeks, got from 20 subscribers to 50 subscribers. And by the end of like the calendar year, maybe I was at 100, 150, 200. Honestly don't remember, but it wasn't really growing that fast. So I just kept learning and learning. And I'm like, I need to build this list. And over time, it took a good year or so. I got to 1,000, then 5,000, then 10,000. The goal for me was to prove to myself that I could grow an email list. And this was before Substack existed. This is before Beehiiv existed. The tools weren't out there. The platforms weren't out there. So it was really by hook or by crook, finding ways to partner with people, doing like kind of traditional PR in a sense to see if you could get placements when, BuzzFeed does that roundup of, the top newsletters you should read. If you get included in that, that's a big win. And thankfully, I
Hmm.
got a lot of that organically because I was an early mover in the newsletter space. Now, though, 15 years later, I'm still writing Now I Know. I've grown up alongside the newsletter space. And what I found is that I have a really deep understanding of the strategy and tactics you need to have in order to build one of these. I haven't done any paid acquisition yet for Now I Know or for the Comstack. It's all organic. And within 2 months of the Comstack, I'm at a little more than 1,000 subscribers.
Wow.
The Comstack really goes back to the whole idea behind Now I Know originally. It's like I need to again master this new tool. In this case, I already know how to run email newsletters. I need to
Hmm.
master AI. It's changing how we work in every single capacity. Communications is obviously not exempt from that. I want to know how to use it as well as anybody else does. And I've already kind of established for myself this principle that I build in public. So when I create something, when I learn something, I want to share it. I do it with Now
Hmm.
I Know. So I said, you know what, let's do it again for AI. And that's where the Comstack came from.
Yeah, that's terrific. Before we go too deep, I'm assuming you did the whole Beehive versus Substack kind of analysis. What drove you towards one versus the other?
Sure. So uh, I talked to the Substack team when they were getting started, and I talked to the Beehive team around when they were getting started. And I think directionally they have different philosophies for what their product is supposed to be at the end of the day. Substack wants to really be about thought leadership, cultivate your own community, and grow through premium subscriptions, which doesn't work for Now I Know because Now I Know is entertainment. It has to be driven by ads, and most of my revenue for Now I Know comes from reader support, but that's people who want to pitch in because they enjoy it more than this is core information you need for your job. So when I decided to switch off of MailChimp a few years ago, I decided to go with Beehive for Now I Know. And I am a big fan of the platform they built. They're really thoughtful about the tools they have available for people like me who are trying to build, basically small media companies. They're looking at how do you monetize, how do you grow, et cetera. And also at this point, I have deep familiarity with their platform, so it was a no-brainer for me to just build the second one on Beehive. I think you can go either way, especially if you're looking to establish thought leadership in a sector. Both make a lot of sense. If you're looking to build more of a bespoke media company, I think Beehive is probably stronger.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've read a lot of Beehive newsletters. I know a lot of folks who are publishing on Substack. It's always interesting to have that conversation about why one or the other. You mentioned monetization. For Now I Know you said that it's predominantly through reader pledges, reader support. Is that a goal for either publication? Or are you looking at more of like, hey, I want to build a community. I want to get to know people, whether it's online or in real life, that kind of thing.
Now I Know it is a hobby that buys me a lot of coffee, basically. It's never really been something. It's not, it's not something that unless I were to scale it up dramatically, it is a career. And I've been very transparent with that in every conversation I've had, including with my readers. Like
Hmm.
I'd like it to pay some bills, obviously, but I'm doing it because I enjoy learning. I come across all these weird, fun facts, and my family doesn't want to hear me talk about this all the time. I want to talk about it with people who want to listen. So I built that audience and created that community. The Comstack, though, I'm hoping that I can turn it into a real business ultimately. I think that there are a lot of opportunities for communicators to learn not just how to use AI, but really why to use it and when to use it. And we're all kind of entering this world together. So it becomes more than just a here's what I'm thinking and here's what I've learned, but how do we learn from each other? How do you build that community? How do you see what other people have created and you know pivot it to your needs, and how do we help each other become better practitioners? That's the ultimate vision. Is I'm on a mission to help people, help communicators use AI in ways that will accelerate their work, level up the quality of that work, and let them have more impact in their roles, but also more free time at the end of the day. Because if we can go faster, in theory, we'll have more leisure time. I'm not going to do that by just like, oh, here's what I learned today and like share that every Wednesday. It's only going to happen if it's a platform for a community to get together and share what they're building.
Yeah. Yeah. We're still at the start of this hike up the mountain,
Hmm.
110%. But I do think that there's already, it was an Axios where you've got three groups. You got the super users, you've got, which, you know, like yourself who's building systems and actually building products. You've got the what I'll call the very introductory, I'm still using it for prompting and getting answers type of a perspective. And then you've got the resistors, which I think the resistors will come around and, everyone kind of moves up the scale at some point. But, when we think about communication system, and I've always been thinking, or communications industry, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately and playing and building and whatnot. The idea of building systems is not something that comes naturally to communicators. Like, yes, we know, okay, a press release process, but that's different than a system necessarily. So it's not about the tools you use, but the systems you build. And that's how true communications teams get ahead. What would you tell, if you were a consultant hired by a team that was just doing the prompting, they weren't building anything necessarily, how do you get them to the next level?
I think that's a great question, and I don't think there's one right answer. If I were chief communications officer, what I would probably do right now is build a small team that is focused on creating the tools, using AI to create the tools that your team needs, and figuring out ways to connect them and build those systems and workflows. And the reason why is really simple. We're all busy. Like if you ask,
That's
I
an understatement.
Right. I had two conversations with former colleagues over the last few days, and I was walking them through something I'm thinking about, and both of them said the same thing. This is really interesting, but I can never do it because I don't have time. They're just too busy. And unfortunately, what I've seen over the last few years is communications teams are slower and slower to hire junior members of the team because one, have to train them and you have to work with them,
Uh-huh.
and we're too busy to do that. And two,
Yep.
there's this idea that AI is going to replace what their outputs are anyway. I think that's probably wrong, but yeah, I can go into it now if you want to.
No, we'll
The
get to it. We'll get
Okay,
to
great.
it.
Find a senior person to lead your AI adoption or AI productivity team embedded in your comms team, somebody who knows communications, understands the technology, and has the soft skills to really work with your existing leadership and your existing team to enable them to be productive with these tools. And let that person build out a small team of two, three, four junior people who can actually be in Claude Code all day and find ways to create what they need and connect things up. And the reason why I think that's the way to go is because, as I said, your existing team is too busy to do it, but they're going to fall behind the teams that actually do make
Yes.
that investment, right? So make the investment, get them up to speed, because most of us aren't going to architect systems or build tools. What we're going to do is use the tools and systems that someone else builds. And that's when the light bulb is going to go off and they're going to say, oh, I want to build something too. Now I need to learn how to do this. And the funny thing is now I may have a little more time because the tools and systems that this like specific or core team has built has taken some stuff off your plate. So you're not, doing 15 iterations of a press release, but instead you're getting like, seven different ones you can put in front of a stakeholder or a synthesized version you can put in front of stakeholders and they can make changes or whatnot. We want to empower our existing teams to be more effective, and asking them to do what they're doing right now, but also use AI is not the way to get there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's one way to do it. I do wonder if you have that conversation where it's, hey, dedicate one person, let them get three others that are a little more junior, maybe a little more AI native. The question always becomes like, well, where are those resources coming from? You're going to have, it's more of finding it internally, finding people who are passionate about it, I think, than being able to find someone because you're going to your point a little bit, like you need that senior person who knows it, inherently knows it, but you do need the builders. And that might be a cross functional team with engineering,
Hmm.
could be developers. It doesn't necessarily have to be communicators. And I do think that everyone has to play with it. Everyone has to. Like the unlock moment for me was literally like, I think it was like, I asked it to just like search my emails and my Slack and pull together like my meetings for the day one morning. And I was like, wait, if it could do it today, I could build that as a skill to do it every day. And then all of a sudden, Claude Cowork has scheduled, and it all becomes an automatic assistant. But then, like, I had it research. I'd literally had it like build an HTML app, and I was like, okay, like this is interesting. Now, how does this work? And like, you evolve from there because it becomes not a what can it do, but what can't it do? And we could just solve a whole bunch of problems that we run into day in, day out versus having to go and find a vendor who's only doing a certain scope and, going to charge $500 a month or what have you.
Yeah, and I want to go back on one thing you said. Like you mentioned that maybe engineers can do this and not communicators. I think to a point that's probably true. But the same problem that you're articulating by talking about vendors, anyone who doesn't have a communications background is going to struggle to understand the why behind what needs to be built. When
Yes.
we as communicators, we have that experience already, we know that already. And what vibe coding allows us to do is to build, if not a final working product, at least a functioning prototype that meets all of our requirements, gets the basic idea down so that someone who with a development background can, you know, make sure there's no like cybersecurity risks and put that polish
Right.
on it, et cetera. Or, hook up, third party APIs that for us we're like, I don't want to do that. That's scary. Right. Like that I agree that engineering should have a role at the table. Don't get me wrong. But I really do think that this needs to be led by communications. And also I go back and forth on whether third-party vendors are a good solution or not. A few years ago, you didn't have that choice. The question was, do you hand it off to your engineering team to build it, or do you go out to the market and buy it off the shelf as a SaaS solution? Right now, we have a third way, and the third way seems like it's the best of both worlds. Right? I get the communications expertise that would have gotten from the vendor, but I also have like the engineering know-how that the developer team in-house has. So that's the way I'd go.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and you're absolutely right. You got to have a communicator at the top of that pyramid of whatever that team looks like so that they know, because they know what good looks like. They know what best looks like. They know what where things are going to fall down. But that engineer or that security expert is going to know, like, hey, there's a data leak here. I will say, like, I've talked to some vendors and they are, well, some of the, probably the smarter ones are leaning in by making APIs more available, being able to, like, I'm not going to, Muckrack has an API for their database.
Mhm.
I believe it's their database. Maybe it's their monitoring tool. But either way, that lets you build a custom monitoring tool, let's just say, where you could pull in APIs from a variety of different vendors that the team is already using. And instead of having four disparate dashboards, you have one consolidated view of your social, of your GEO, of your media monitoring, and you don't need to go to four different websites and do it.
Yeah.
You know?
And then the next layer we're going to see are everyone's going to have an MCP, a way for their
Yes.
platforms to talk with Claude or Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever. Beehiiv rolled out an MCP a few weeks ago. As a result, if you want to figure out how to, even something as simple as read their documentation, you just ask Claude to read the documentation. But if you want to, dig deeper into your list segments, it can do that as well. So I think we're going to see that as well, where over time, the AI chatbot window is going to be our entry point to a lot of different services. That's another reason why I think it's imperative that we as communicators get more and more comfortable with that interface, because that's going to be the interface we use for a lot more than we think.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other side of that is the companies need to get more and more comfortable with allowing non-developers, non-engineering folks who are trained to use things like webhooks and APIs.
Mhm.
Because I build things and I'm like, okay, well, I build it on my personal machine. I can do it on my personal machine. I move it over to my corporate machine where I want to like have a simple Slack message every week on this is what's coming from the Smartsheet calendar. The APIs are there, the webhooks are there, but permissions are blocked.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a long time before companies get comfortable with that because the risk is enormous. One thing
Totally.
that you hear a lot about is agentic AI, the idea that you're going to have a lot of AI agents working together, doing their own thing, and you just like wake up in the morning and all your work's done. The magic part of that sounds great, but the risk part is enormous because every time you don't have that, the phrase being used is human in the loop and whatever, we'll go with it. When you don't have the human in the loop too often, you run the risk of a massive problem, and you can't really afford too many massive problems. So I think that companies are understandably and probably properly reluctant to do that. That said, there are ways to do it safely. Like if you have some AI coding agent on your work laptop or whatever, and you're only allowed to run things locally on your machine, there's only so much damage you can actually do. So I think we'll see more of that next, but I don't know. That's a
Or
pretty random prediction.
or you gotta have an engineering chaperone or buddy or something, to to kind of help you along because, like you said,
Mhm.
we're not trained in this stuff. You mentioned a little while ago, folks aren't hiring junior people. Let's talk a little bit about how AI is impacting the more junior entry level roles a little bit. What are
Yeah.
you seeing? What are you hearing? You talk to folks day in, day out about this topic.
Yeah. So unfortunately, entry level junior roles are fewer and further between than before, in part because, the job market's a little soft, to say the least. And also because of, I don't want to say necessarily AI itself. I want to say more concerns about AI, where you hire somebody who, has, you know, 0 to 3 years of experience, and you realize that what they're doing, someone else, either at a competitive firm or even somebody else in your organization, is getting the same output by just using ChatGPT better, right? Oh, so the attitude is, let's just not hire for those roles and let's figure out a way to do it using AI, right? The reason I think that's a mistake is twofold. The first is that you want to bring people into the fold who are entering this AI first world as AI natives. And that's who's doing it. I have a college age son who will be graduating in a couple of years, and I keep encouraging him to, every time he does something that he's allowed to for class, because sometimes classes don't let him, like, run it through ChatGPT. I'm going to get him started on Claude Code over the summer. The opportunity for him to enter the world thinking that this is the right way to do it because it's the only way he's done it unlocks a ton of value for employers. And because you don't have to train them, you don't have to explain the why to them. You don't even, what they need to learn is how is does communications work generally, and once they do, it's like they have a jetpack on there because they're going to be able to, without any training without ever having to think about how do I tackle this the quote unquote normal way, the old way, they're going to just do it the new way and it's going to go faster for them and they're going to just skip steps. So if you're looking to build out your team, the opportunity you have by hiring more junior members is you're going to get the value of their inexperience with the traditional ways in a weird way, but also you're building people who are going to quickly become difference makers and leaders in your own organization if they have those soft skills, if they have the skills that you would normally need to be a leader anyway. So you're actually building for the future without actually losing much in the current, right? Because we've seen the surveys. I think there's a Boston Consulting Group survey that said that comms teams are lagging behind.
68% of CCOs describe their
Was it
function as laggards.
68%? Was that the number?
That was the
Right?
number.
And that's shockingly high. Like, how can we be in a situation right now where we know AI is changing how we work, and we have mandates from the CEO and the rest of the C-suite to adopt these tools, adopt these practices, et cetera. And our takeaway is, yeah, we know, and we're still lagging. Like, you need to make that fundamental change. And not the scary thing, the opportunity is actually a pretty easy one to capitalize on, because maybe it's, take people in their current roles and build that tiger team of,
Mhm.
enthusiasts. Great. Maybe it's what I said earlier, you hire specifically for the AI adoption role and build out that team. I know a couple of companies doing that. But whatever it is, it's the same path forward. It's actually have people build the tools, build those workflows, build those systems, and start using them. And I think everyone else will come around in time. And those who don't, they're probably not the ones who are going to be they're not the ones who are responsible for those outputs in the first place, right? When you have a very senior communicator, I was having, again, a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of days ago. Her reaction is, I'm never going to build these tools. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. And the reason why is because she already has that infrastructure in place. She has the junior members who do the first draft of the press release, who put
Mhm.
together the comms plans. She's there to advise the C-suite and other executives on strategy. She's there to look out for the watch outs that are, business killers. And that doesn't change. The judgment, the creativity, the sometimes cynicism, that's where she is in her career. AI isn't replacing that anyway. So she didn't need to learn these tools or systems or whatever. It's the next generation that does. And pretending like someone at her level is going to just build those tools anyway is it's kind of silly. It's just never gonna happen.
Yeah, I didn't dive into the questions that the Boston Consulting Group asked. I'm curious about that too, because it does feel like maybe the CCOs feel like they're laggards because they feel like everyone else is moving fast, but doesn't realize that nobody is really ahead of the curve necessarily. Like there are teams that are vibe coding and doing codeathon, like hackathons basically with Lovable and whatnot. And they are building systems like we're talking about, but they're not that far behind. They just feel like it because it's in the news all the time. It's more of a perception thing than a reality. But there are going to be teams that are just doing more. But when you look around the room, almost don't even know who's doing it because there is still that perception of like,
Yeah.
do I want someone to know that Joe is doing XYZ with Claude and ChatGPT, or, you know, that's just Joe's skill?
Yeah. I I think you're right that there is a perception problem here. I have two thoughts on that. The first is that if two-thirds of communications leads, if two-thirds of CCOs think that they're lagging behind, do they think they're lagging behind other communications teams or the rest of their
Right.
companies, right?
It's a good
And
question.
I'm guessing it's the latter because if it's two-thirds of them, then they're clearly not all lagging behind. They're probably all in roughly the same place. So I think you're right. I think it's everyone else is talking about AI, 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 but meanwhile, I haven't seen anything AI produced out of my team in a meaningful way yet. And the other reason why, the second point is, I don't think communications work necessarily lends itself to what LLMs can do versus what other professions or other groups can get more value out of it. I mean, clearly engineering teams can code a lot faster because they have vibe coding tools now. But
Huh?
like finance, you can take a huge data set and spit out like key learnings in seconds. And that took hours of manual work beforehand. There's no real communications equivalent for that. I don't practice law anymore, but my guess is that you can probably do the same thing for legal arguments if you have the right database built. And when it comes to other teams as well, you'll probably see some teams that are just better able to grab that low hanging fruit that LLMs can yield than a communications team can. Because at the end of the day, we need to be applying judgment. We need to be applying
Yes.
years of experience that you're ever going to get from a bot that just lacks the ability to be creative or empathetic or cynical or push through fear or raise the alarm bell. That's not what they do, right? They're complicated pattern matchers. So I think that's part of it too. I do think there's a perception that communicators are generally behind. But I also fear that the need for communicators to adopt AI tools isn't as emergent as it is in other places. So we run the risk of being laggards
Mhm.
regardless.
You were just talking about how AI and LLMs don't have the empathy and the strategy and the nuance. And I think the other side of that is the models are trained. They're a lot more recent, but in a lot of cases on past things, not the day to day that we navigate in a rapid response environment. So even if you build something, and this is a tool that I'm playing with, build something that you insert a pitch and it spits out a whole bunch of targets with the context as to what they, why this one over that one, or what their recent coverage is. It's not what they covered this morning. It's what they covered when the model was built. It's what I get frustrated with Gemini because I'm like, Gemini is Google essentially, and I'm finding menus for restaurants that are closed. I'm like, shouldn't this not be that way? But that's the difference between Google search and Google Gemini. Google search is more real time. So it's definitely an area that we need to navigate as communicators. You're building this AI stack for communicators. You're building the com stack where you're writing what about weekly? Every
Yeah, it's
other
weekly, every Wednesday.
every Wednesday. But now I know has been about 15 years, you said, daily. I'm going to ask this question because I think it's just fascinating. Most newsletters fail because the writer burns out before the audience grows. You've obviously grown now, I know. You've written daily for 15 years. I can't even do the math on that. How
Neither
many?
can I.
I mean, like, how do you keep going?
There are times where it's hard, I'll admit. So first of all, from like a time management perspective, I've operationalized it fantastically. I can write something in 90 minutes and I often write it in less than that.
Okay.
There are two things and also I have it down to, I have a pattern now. So I write something new Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. I share a rerun on Wednesdays, and Friday is kind of like an open-ended week in review. Sometimes it might just be like hey, I got nothing to share this week, but here's what I wrote about. Sometimes it might be like why I think Monopoly is a bad board game. Like it could be really anything. I keep it kind of random and fun. So that part's easy because it's just what's on my mind, but also appropriate for my readers. The Monday, Tuesday, Thursday though, I am insatiably curious and I love learning about new things. And the spark you get from learning something new and you're like, oh wow, that's really neat is great. And that's usually enough to help you go a little bit. But the that spark gets amplified when you share it with people and you get like one or two notes back from people saying, oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad I learned this. Every once in a while I'll write about like some random thing that happens in some small town and someone will reply back and be like, I was there. Or I wrote one like this is like 10 years ago about how there was a an unlicensed version of Cinderella's castle being built somewhere in China, and
Wow.
like it got built like 80% of the way there, and you can still see it on the side of the road if you drive down this one road. And a couple days later, I get an email from somebody saying, I was just driving past that. I took a picture. I had no idea what it was, and you told me, I'm like, oh wow, like that keeps it going.
Yeah.
Like because the joy of discovery and of learning just compounds when you share it.
Yep. Awesome. Joy of discovery and learning. I feel like we got to end it there. Whether it's AI or just continuous writing and trivia, I feel like that's the moment that we're just like, boom, put a punctuation mark on this one.
Love it, love it. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Dan, thanks for joining us. Where can people sign up for the Comstack? Now I know, catch up with you personally.
Sure. So the Comstack is thecomstack.com. Now I know is nowiknow.com. And I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn and everywhere else. There are a lot of Dan Lewis's out there, but I tend to rank toward the top on Google. Not always, but usually.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thanks again for joining us. And for everyone else, catch you again in a couple weeks.